Hi, and welcome to the Brohoyo podcast. We're the gotcha podcast where we talk about gotcha in general and Hoyoverse games in specific. I'm your host, Steven, and this is my co host, David.
Hey, yo.
David, how about you lead us in? What is our topic for this week?
Yeah, so this week we're going to be discussing some of the other games in the franchise, as it were, of kind of the open world gotcha games and the competition that they're going to bring versus Genshin Impact and what that could mean for Genshin Impact and what it means for the genre as a whole. And specifically, I know we're going to do a lot of talking about Wuthering Waves because they just had their second closed beta test the last week, but also other games on the radar include that come to mind offhand here would be Arknight's Enfeld and Seven Deadly Sins Origin are all looking to be that open world RPG exploration stuff and maybe catch on to some of that success that Genshin has seen. Now, obviously, all three of those are different franchises and different IPs that will have a different theme or approach to it. Because I think Arknights and Wuthering Waves are maybe taking not as colorful and sunny of an approach in a post-apocalyptic world. And then Seven Deadly Sins, the anime IP itself, was generally pretty colorful and bright and happy. It may be in the same vein, but for me, that one is being produced by Netmarble, so there are some red flags that come with them for me, but we'll see what they do with it. But Steve, what do you have any insight? Did you get in any of the betas first? Let me start there.
I was not in any of these betas. I have no experience with any of these games firsthand. Basically, my entire knowledge regarding this subject is going to be based off of YouTube videos and Let's Plays that I watched. I also did go out and try out Punishing Gray Raven, which
Hmm.
was the game previously done by the Wuthering Waves folks. Koba Games, I believe, was the company name.
I believe, yeah, that's the studio that
Yeah.
did PGR. Yes, sir.
Yeah, so I tried them out to try and get an idea of what their previous games were and try and see if maybe I would gel with them. I do have some thoughts on that, but I do want to hold off on covering that for the moment, but that will come up later.
Okay. Yeah, that's sure, and that's a good thought too, and a good reminder that yeah, that studio did Punishing Gray Raven, which is an action RPG esque. It's actually similar to Honkai Impact the Third from Hoyoverse, which has been out for quite a while. As far as my experience with these games, I also unfortunately did not get into the closed beta for Wuthering Waves, but I did watch a lot of content creators and streamers on Twitch, and so it felt as if I was experiencing it firsthand, minus all the button presses. And then I've been following Arknight's Enfeld and the news that we get over here through various channels, whether it be Bilibili, Reddit, or directly from the websites themselves. But what, from your take or your impression of Punishing Gray Raven, as that, because you said you tried it out, had you played it when it launched at all, or was this your first take with Punishing Gray Raven?
This was my first take with it. I hadn't played it previously. As far as the reason why I'm dancing around it is because I don't have a lot nice to say about it, is the honest answer. In general, I don't think it was a bad game. It just has a very bad PC port. It has the same problem that Honkai the Third has on its PC port, where it seems like it wants to do everything on the keyboard. It doesn't account for the mouse very well. Yeah, it really it plays very awkwardly in that sense. If and that's why I don't want to hold it against Wuthering Waves when that comes out. Hopefully that game is built with a PC client in mind. You can tell that with Punishing Gray Raven, it was a mobile game first that they ported over to PC. It was not a game that was designed with PC in mind. Or at least that PC client was not designed with mouse and keyboard in mind. It was a let's map as many of these things to something that makes sense and just go with it.
From what I remember, because I played Punishing Gray Raven a little bit at launch when it did first come out, and for a game like that, any action RPG on the phone to me, and this is maybe just I can't, I'm not able to function with a screen that size with my hands that are going to cover up most of the screen where all the action is, right? So I think I played that through an emulator in order to have better access to it. And similar to what you said, I did enjoy it to an extent, but yeah, that didn't necessarily make use, obviously, because you're on an emulator. So yeah, it is what it is. Now, as far as like over time, I'm sure there have been some quality of life upgrades that you got to experience that weren't a thing when I was starting playing it. Now, as far as how what you experienced and what you saw versus in Punishing Gray Raven, did you notice kind of any similarities or any parallels in the Let's Plays that you watched for Wuthering Waves?
One of the big things that I saw was the parry system that I don't think it's the same as in Wuthering Waves, but there is definitely that element. I do think that there is a level of when you're watching someone on a Let's Play, it's very easy to criticize them and go, "Oh, why aren't you parrying more? It's so obvious. I can see that circle. I'm paying attention to that circle. Why aren't you able to do these parries and execute the way that I feel that you should as a backseat gamer?" Having played Punishing Gray Raven, I am now much more forgiving of a lot of the, let's say, quality of play that I was seeing. Their parry system was not nearly as responsive as I hoped it was. Now, to be fair, again, part of it was a scheme issue with the way that they wanted you to play on the keyboard only, where I was really fighting to try and use the mouse. The camera really fought with you because, again, you don't have a mouse, so you have to tab target, and then you lock onto an opponent and go with that. It doesn't appear to be the case in Wuthering Waves. It does look like, based off of what I have seen, that you'll be able to, it'll have much closer to a Genshin control scheme. It also seems to have a much more simplified combat system in the sense that in Punishing Gray Raven, you get a lot of buttons on the screen. You get a lot of actions. The way that their skill system works, you can have up to 8 skills appear on your screen, and you have to choose and pick and so on in the middle of combat. That system doesn't seem to be in place for Wuthering Waves. There might be a specific character or subset of characters that have something like that, but from what I have seen, that system doesn't exist. So I think, or I hope, that they'll have taken the lessons that Genshin has taught and hopefully the lessons that they have learned from Punishing Gray Raven and created something that's a little bit more responsive, a little bit more friendly to PC players. But again, I don't know if they even are really considering PC heavily as their market. So I don't know how much development time they're really devoting to getting that part of the game polished versus maybe a more mobile experience. That's just something I don't know. But yeah, I would say that Wuthering Waves looks like it is a much more polished, much more focused version of Punishing Gray Raven, but without being at the keyboard playing and able to feel the responsiveness. I don't want to say too much or
Until we have
yeah.
that hands-on experience, everything is going to be subject to change until once we get the controller or the mouse in this case in our hands, right?
Mm.
And I think you touched on some things and something that I'm interested in because, like you said, they've had years essentially of Genshin being out, being released, seeing how the public has responded to it, to learn from maybe some of Genshin's pitfalls or capitalize on things that Genshin did really well. And we'll see how they adapt to that and how they put their own spin on things. So something that I think that they're going to, and I haven't, like I said, been able to really test confirm this because you can only progress so far in a beta. People only have so much time to play a beta before the weekend or whatever it was over. In terms of the combat, because I think that with Wuthering Waves, we're going to see combat that is a little bit more intricate and a little bit more nuanced as opposed to Genshin, where you're spamming your skills, you're spamming your auto attacks, or you're spamming rotation. There will be, I think, times in Withering Waves where it's not going to be optimal to just spam that attack button because they do have the parry system or that counter type system. And so I think in that regard, there will be a little bit more nuance, and the combat isn't going to be as easy as it is just as maybe to button mash Genshin, essentially button mash, as you can in Genshin.
Well,
And I
really quickly,
also Yeah.
Really quickly, just to step in there, in your opinion, do you think that's a pro or a con for it?
So I think to the hardcore gamers, to the people that have been playing Genshin and begging for end game content, it's going to be a positive for those types of people because it's combat that's going to be challenging. And to bleed into my next point, something I read and I heard of, but I can't confirm it again because the closed beta was only so long, is that some of these bosses that there are in Wuthering Waves, depending on the difficulty level, their tactics change or they become more aggressive, perhaps. It's not just that they have more health and are a more of a bullet sponge like they are in Genshin difficulties, but that their tactics change. And that maybe they have new abilities that they aren't using at an easier difficulty. Again, I don't know if that's confirmed or not. That's something I read or was maybe speculated, and I'm conflating the two. But if that is the case, and even if it's not the case, I would still stand by my statement that the combat seems a little harder. But to your point, it's good for those people that, like I said, are dying for end game content in Genshin, and all they're getting is the spiral abyss that they've been 36 starring since the sixth month of the game being out. But with more challenging combat, it's how much more of a challenge is it going to be? Because you are going to potentially lose some of those casual players who do enjoy Genshin because it's casual. The end game is relatively simple, and they enjoy the mini games and more of the character development and the world building, as opposed to min-maxing your substats on an artifact set so that you can beat the hardest bosses or learning to precision dodge various attacks or whatever have you. I think to some of the audience, it's a good thing, and to some of the audience, it's a bad thing. So I know that's an on the fence answer.
No,
For me, it's I don't mind more intricate combat. I think it will provide more of a challenge in the combat, which for me I like a challenge. I do like that while not being unreasonably unobtainable.
fair enough. I do think that I don't think you're necessarily being on the fence. I do think that there is a sort of gulf that we are going to see. In my gut, there's a large part of my brain parts that are saying that a lot of people are asking for hardcore, a more difficult version of Genshin. And while I'm not saying that audience doesn't exist, I feel like it's the same issue that you're going to end up getting with the ever elusive PvP MMO, where in everybody is always asking for that ever elusive PvP MMO where you can go out and you can take over the world and be a conqueror and a PvP based MMO. Thinking of New Worlds here as an example. But the problem is that those games very rarely do well. It's not that they don't have an audience, it's that they don't have a mass appeal audience. And when you are putting that much money into a project, you got to go for mass appeal. So the only way I can see Wuthering Waves working as it is described right now, and as I have seen it right now, is you eventually have to get to a point where at the very least the dailies and the sort of content that you're going to do weekly and over again just as the grind content, that has to hit a point to where you can do it without really having to focus too hard on it, or they have to have it set up to where you can do some sort of auto repeat where if you beat it once in a week, you just insert your daily resource and it pops out the stuff that you want. That
Well,
if you're looking for mass appeal.
I I don't think that for the last bit that you said, I'll just touch on that last format that you said about just putting in a resource and popping out the results, right? I think similar to Genshin and their domains that they make you run, they're gonna make you run whatever the equivalent to domains in Wuthering Waves because you're playing the game, right?
More to clarify, I apologize. To
Okay.
clarify, I'm thinking more of like in Nikkei, how you have the harder bosses, like the daily harder bosses, where once you beat them, you can just hit the button that says, yeah, whatever, just give me the same rewards as if I had done the exact same
Oh,
time.
I
Something
got you.
similar to that. I'm not
So beat it like once during the day, and then however many X attempts, just boom. So
correct.
okay, yeah. So similar, somewhat similar to the condensed resin concept in Genshin, except for ideally you don't want to have a farmable reagent and then craft it. You could just do it.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm with you.
Oh, sorry.
And And I think, and another thing too that I'm seeing that I saw Withering Waves kind of introduce, which will have some, I think, staying power with some of their audience, will be the Pokemon-esque collector type, where there's you go out and you beat the bosses, and you get the bosses at different rarities type things, and some of them can even be shinies. I thought that was an interesting concept to introduce, and then some of the abilities that you use are from those bosses that you equip, and the rarer the quote unquote boss is that dropped, the stronger the ability, perhaps. I didn't quite see the full functionality of how that system worked, but the Pokemon mechanic I thought was an interesting one to introduce. So I'm curious to see how that plays out with the eventual fan base for the game.
Unfortunately, you have activated my trap card. I have created a list, and I created a list of the good and the bad,
Okay.
and you have accidentally tripped into two, maybe three of my the bads.
You were not a fan of this Pokemon
Well,
theme.
I want to clarify. A lot of the information I'm about to start sharing came from Gotcha Gamer. He did a video called the I don't want to say it's the horrible truth, but the harsh truth of Wuthering Waves, where he goes into a lot of the systems in the game and explains how a lot of these systems works and his thoughts. And what I really want to focus on is the Echo system that was just brought up, which again, that's for those of you who are in the audience and unaware, the Echo system is basically, to be really mean, it is the combination of the worst aspects of Pokemon with the worst aspects of the artifact slash relic system in Genshin or Honkai Star Rail. And all this information is only as of the closed beta test 2. This is all obviously potentially able to change. But essentially, the way the ecosystem works is that unlike Genshin, you don't go to a domain in order to get echoes. You have to defeat overworld enemies, and then they will potentially drop an echo, which is just a Pokemon that you equip. They serve the same they serve the same purpose or function as relics or artifacts from Hoyoverse games. The problem is that when they drop, bosses only drop in a given set. Every other enemy type will drop in a random set. So you don't know what you're getting. When you're fighting random enemies, bosses will drop a specific set. Now, the nice part is that as long as you do not collect the rewards for the boss, you can infinitely grind bosses for echoes. Which sounds good until you realize that the balancing factor that they have put in place is that you cannot see the substats of any of these artifacts. So if you hypothetically grind out crit damage on a boss echo, so you kill the boss over and over and over again, probably for 30 minutes to an hour, because there's about a 5-minute timer on this. So you do this multiple times, you finally get the artifact that you want, and with the main stat that you want, you can only see one of the substats. The remaining substats are hidden from you, and you have to use a resource that is tied to your daily resin, energy, what have you, in order to unlock whatever that substat is. And you don't know what, obviously you can't know what that is. It's randomized. Yes, you can grind infinitely, but that wonderful crit damage main echo that you got could roll into flat HP. There's 14 different substats available, and most characters are only going to need maybe 3 or 4. At the highest rarity, you can have 5 substats on these items. Odds are good that you're not really going to roll into anything useful, based off of the numbers I saw. Also added on top of this is their shiny versions, which are neat, but I'm not a shiny hunter, but there are people out there who will want shiny versions, which just adds more to this entire system. And then on top of all of that, the substats their values are randomized, similar to Genshin, where you can get anywhere between, the example that I saw was attack percentage, basic attack percentage can go anywhere between 4.2 and 11.9% bonus. So you could get the substat that you want, but you could get a very bad version of that substat. So there's a lot of randomization in the system. There's a lot of grinding involved. I'm not a fan of the way it's been implemented. The other kind of side issue to this is that your team is limited to 3 characters. I already find 4 characters very limiting. Limiting them even further to 3, I think, and this is just me personally, I believe that part of the reason for that is because of the way echoes work. You basically get a free second character in the form of your Pokemon boss monster that you can turn into for each character. Oh, you don't really have 3, you have 6, but I would rather have 6 main gotcha characters that I'm pulling for and enjoying than 3 characters that I get to half use as another character. I don't like that. It doesn't sit well with me. Maybe when I get my hands on it, it'll work and I'll fall in love with it. But at least from what I'm seeing right now, the ecosystem seems to be a rather brutal version of the relic system.
I guess
Oh,
in fairness, there could be a system that they haven't implemented yet in regards to like maybe re-rolling those substats, but based off of kind of just gotcha history, it's a very rare where we see something like that. Genshin still doesn't have that. I've been wanting like that's in every survey I do in additional notes. I'm like, please let us implement something that lets us choose at least to re-roll like one specific substat or re-roll what things have rolled into type things, but it's very rare. I think Epic 7 offhand lets you reroll one substat on gear. If you get flat defense and you want to like, no, I was really hoping for attack percentage or crit percent, you can use this item and it lets you do that. Now it took them a few years to even implement that. So like I said, the odds of it are very low, which doesn't bode well. And also what you said, if we're falling into the old gotcha habit of substat. We have 14 stats, only 3 of them are useful to DPS units, and the rest are throwaways. That's another thing that we're in 2024, and that is still gotcha gear 101 that everybody seems to go by.
yeah, and again, it's I don't want to throw out the baby with the bathwater. I don't necessarily think that the idea is rotten to the core. I just think that as it is implemented at this time, there's a lot of potential grinding involved with it. And the other caveat to this is it could be like Genshin, where really you don't need to have super high tier, super god artifacts, super god echoes to beat most content. Where as long as you are of moderate skill level with moderate equipment, you'll do fine. That it won't be an issue. But that's still very much so an unknown.
Now you said you had a list of pros and cons. So were there any other maybe bad that you wanted to talk about, or do we want to give them a little bit of credit and maybe touch on some of your goods?
Yeah, I'd rather touch on the goods. I really, I'm going to come across very negative in this one. Just, I know it. That's the way it's going
We're
to
not all
be.
doom and gloom, right?
Yeah.
These are just the big things. But yeah, what's some good stuff that you saw from your viewings?
One of the big things that I really liked is the movement in the game. It comes up a lot, but you don't have to climb in the game. You don't use stamina to run, to climb, to do any of that. Stamina is just used for dodging and dashing, which I think is a nice in between the Breath of the Wild style, slower paced exploration style, and the look, man, I've gone over this map so many times, just let me get to where I need to go. Um, so I think I'm at the point where it's I just want to go where I want to go. I don't want to have to worry about a stamina bar in order to climb this wall in order to get something. It is a very stylish game. It does look very good. And I guess another one, I'm going to keep a couple in my back pocket here because, again, there's going to be more bad coming down the pipe. But another good one is it at least looks to me, or there's the one of the events in the game was a roguelike mode. Gotcha Gamer, and again, I'm pulling a lot of this from Gotcha Gamer. In his video, he mentions that it could be a limited time event, but there is a pretty decent chance that it could be longer term because it has a resetting cash shop or a resetting shop associated to it, shop that is set to expire associated with this roguelike mode. If that roguelike mode is a permanent game mode that is just on a reset timer, that would have me somewhat excited for the game if it's a legitimate in-game thing to do, similar to with Honkai Star Rail, the simulated universe. I'm a fan of roguelikes. I'm a fan of having that game mode. Yeah. Let's leave that as the good. Do you have any thoughts or any other goods that you want to cover real quick, Dave?
Yeah, so similar to you, I liked the flashiness of the game. I thought it looked very polished and everything like that. And I know, and even with these bads or goods that we're throwing out, it is again, we know this is in closed beta testing. This isn't the final product. This is where they can still workshop things and get feedback from the game race. That's the whole point of this. So that's part of why I wanted to have this discussion as far as what our thoughts were and what we saw, because as people that have played gotchas extensively in action RPGs and such, this is the feedback I would get in on. But yeah, I thought the combat looked fluid and good. I thought a lot of like the cutscenes, everything looked really nice and polished. I like you the first time I saw them quote unquote climb a wall, and it was like, oh, there's not really stamina per se. It's they're wall running, and so it's not like this very slow thing that you have to climb. And if you're climbing a tall mountain or scaling the tall side of a mountain, you can't jump to speed up because that reduces your stamina bar faster. You just ran up and then did this cool hardcore parkour type thing. I thought that was a nice quality of life item. Like you, I also would prefer larger rosters of characters as opposed to smaller, just because I think that's more fun. I know four is like the traditional number that everybody goes with in terms of party size. So yeah, seeing it reduced down to three, like you said, three true gotcha units, that's a little that's a little sad. But you have again the echoes in there to substitute for character 1A, character 2A, and character 3A type thing. So I mean, at least there is that, so you can have that variety and that customizable aspect of gameplay. Whereas opposed to in Genshin, you pull character, their kit is their kit. That's what it is. So there's maybe that little bit of flexibility. Now, as far as well, I guess you still had a few more things. So I want to touch on a few more things, and then I want to shift the conversation to talk about what can Withering Waves maybe learn from Genshin's launch or Genshin's early days. But let's finish up your list first and touch on those points.
Okay, yeah. Honestly, you were touching on something that was going to be the me wrapping up the list, which is one good, one bad, real quick. I'll start with the bad, end with the good. For the bad, it's that the end game looks like it's going to be another Genshin style Abyss clone, where you go into a empty arena and you fight enemies on a timed mode, and that's the end game content. It's a fairly standard rip of the Abyss. Not super excited about it. It does also look like they are they are compensating for the smaller team size by making it so that every unit has an energy score going into this semi abyss mode, and you can't use the same unit multiple times or more than say two or three times in
Ooh,
this,
okay.
let's say nine. I didn't get a lot of gameplay on that one, but let's say there's 9 rounds, you could only maybe use a character for two or three of them. So you still need to have lots of characters to switch them out in order to complete it, which is the compensation to force you to actually pull. So you can't just pull three and be, okay, I'm done, I don't need anything else. They have that mechanism in place. So that's my bad. For my good, I do want to bring up that it looks like they are going to be much more generous with the weapon banner that they have. That Wuthering Waves, at least at the moment, seems to have a Genshin style banner. 80 max pity, but 50-50 you pull the same way you do in Genshin or Honkai
Hmm.
Star Rail. The difference being that they have a unique weapon banner that if you hit the pity on the weapon banner, you get the weapon. There is no 50-50, there is no 75-25. You just get the weapon.
Oh, it is
Um,
it's 100% for the banner weapon when okay.
Yep, correct. And then, again, as of closed beta test 2. And then for their standard banner, you have a standard character banner and you have a standard weapon banner. And for the weapon banner, you select the weapon you want and you roll and you get that weapon. For the character banner, you roll and you get a character. My only concern with that is that if it might end up in a situation, and again, this is a might, maybe, big asterisk here, might not happen, but because it is so easy to get your hands on these weapons, I could see a very easy situation to where, in order to make a character, I don't want to say playable, but in order to really get a character at their base value, you need to get both the character and the weapon. So you might be pulling for the character when you're 50-50 and then have to turn around and spend 80 pulls in order to get the weapon in order for them to be, I don't want to say fully viable, but for their kit to actually be fun and good to play.
So the concern being that the weapon for a character will fully enable the character effect, essentially. Interesting. Yeah,
Yeah.
that could be something to watch. That's because that is a possibility with that structure. I'm not saying that they're going to do it, of course, just that potentially.
Yeah, and again, that's a in the back of my mind, that is what I am concerned about, but I have no evidence for that. I'm not accusing
Sure.
them of that. I'm
Yeah.
just
So
concerned about it.
yeah, so it's a good in that we appreciate that the weapon banner is effectively guaranteed here. There's no coin flip, there's no 50-50 to lose or 60-40 or whatever it is. It's just you hit your 5 star, it's going to be the one that you want on the weapon banner. The potential why this is looks good up front but could potentially be bad on the back end is yeah, similar to what you said in functionality of how much do you have to invest in a character to make them playable. No, that's a fair point. Like I said, something to watch. Again, yeah, to reiterate your point and stress, you're not saying that's what they're going to do or it's going to be anything like that, but it is a possibility. Now, like I said, I kind of want to shift the conversation. So we've talked about our experiences in terms of what we've seen through videos and Let's Plays and Twitch streams. But in terms of the launch itself of the game, so we don't have a launch date specifically. And I know that we're focusing a lot on Wuthering Waves as opposed to Arknight's Endfeld or opposed to Seven Deadly Sins Origins. That's because Wuthering Waves, we just know more about. We've had 2 closed beta tests. We know that it's going to, I believe it's no date for any of these 3 has been announced yet, but I believe we have a sooner time frame for Wuthering Waves. So I don't want to make it seem like we're just focusing on this because it was our favorite of the 3. It's just because there's more out there for it. Arknight's Enfeld, I know has stuff going on with it as well, and then Seven Deadly Sins Origins, we've seen a couple of teaser trailers, but they're nothing nearly as in depth as what we've seen with Wuthering Waves. I think is that fair? In terms of
Yes,
like
yes, that
things
is.
that things
Yeah.
that you yeah. So shifting to the upcoming and inevitable launch for Wuthering Waves, because I want to talk about it now in relation to Genshin in terms of what can maybe Wuthering Waves do at launch or in the early days while players are in their honeymoon phase to maybe extend that phase out or have a better retention after the honeymoon phase ends. What's maybe things that they can learn on that maybe Genshin potentially fumbled a little bit and has either picked up the slack since then, or maybe Genshin continue to have some missed opportunities.
Yeah. I'm going to be honest. I really do think that the unfortunate answer is that unless Wuthering Waves really brings something to the table, really ups their game quite a bit, they're going to get a decent chunk of players who are going to stick around. I don't think the game's going to do poorly, but I don't believe that it's going to. I don't think it's going to win over the large chunk of the Genshin game fan base, just because of inertia within Genshin. You have a Genshin still has a lot of content. It still has a lot going
Mhm.
for it. So I could see Wuthering Waves becoming either a backup game for a lot of people, or the blunt answer is it's going to come down to, hey, I play Wuthering Waves during the spring and summer when Genshin is in its down period, when there's nothing to do, and then I shelve it during the fall and winter when Genshin's real hot. I don't want to be too negative on the game. Again, I don't think it's bad or anything, but I don't see what it's offering at this point in time being a large enough draw for a majority of Genshin players for
Mhm.
it to have the. It's not a Genshin killer. Let me just be. I'll say it. It's not a Genshin killer.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I don't think it's going to be a Genshin killer either. I think Genshin, and we've touched on this in the past, Genshin was released during such a unique time in our history as a society. And similar to what you said, we'll get a player base to try it out, but the vast majority of Genshin players will continue to play Genshin. If they're able to manage and play Wuthering Waves as well, they'll do that. But if they have to choose one because of a lot of psychological reasons, the predominant one being sunk cost fallacy, they're going to stick with Genshin. Unless, like you said, unless Wuthering Waves does something absolutely game changing that Genshin can't quickly replicate. But I think Wuthering Waves on its own will be fine. I think there will be a space for it to exist and do decently, but will it be shattering and breaking records like Genshin? We've seen some of those numbers on Sensor Tower and other resources. No, I don't think it'll hit those heights. But could it be in the top five? Surely. That's where I kind of place it. But yeah, as far as Genshin Killer, I hate it when people talk about that in any genre, but we've seen it a lot here with anybody looking for Genshin to fail. Genshin's not going to fail. It's too big. They put too much effort, and there are too many good things about it for a vocal minority on the internet to try and tear it down.
Yeah. And I guess I technically dodged the question of what should they learn from Genshin, so I do apologize
Yeah,
about that.
and then you got me off on a bunny trail, but hey, that's
Yeah.
what we do,
Eh,
right? And the other thing too, and I guess my question's maybe not entirely fair to ask you because I know for you, for Genshin, on initial launch, I don't know if the game was even on your radar, but you didn't pick it up for a few months. And me, it was on my radar, but I didn't actually start playing it until a few months after it was released, just because my phone couldn't handle it and I didn't have a computer at the time. I was in between computers, as it were. But then as soon as I got my computer, that was like the first thing I downloaded. Like those initial launch days and first couple of events, I missed out on. So I don't know if it's even a fair question to ask of you, but go ahead and try.
I'll be honest, I was waiting for that wonderful Switch release. I was game to play it on the
Yeah,
Switch.
we're still waiting for that.
Yeah. So that never came about, but so I guess first things first, Wuthering Waves release on the Switch. Um, but in more seriousness, I think one of the bigger things that they should probably focus on is not falling into the Zhongli trap. And it's a problem that I've seen with specifically Genshin. It's a specifically Genshin problem where a lot of the early characters seemed to break the game in ways that they didn't probably intend. Now, Zhongli was a special case, but because of him, he warped the entire meta of the game in such a, in my opinion, unhealthy way that they're still trying to
Now,
untangle that particular.
really quickly to clarify this, are you referencing Zhong Li in terms of how he was initially sent, or are you talking about after they tweaked slash buffed him?
After the tweak, where I never got to play him pre-tweak. I wasn't even playing when all of that controversy was going on, so that is before my time. But I can tell you with 100% sincerity that at least until Fontaine, Zhongli has. When I say horribly warped, I don't necessarily mean this as it's his fault or it's that character's fault. I just mean that they created a character who had such a strong shield with such strong buffs to him that he invalidated so much of the game. You can tell that they really didn't plan to make shielding as powerful as they did. They really weren't planning on making defensive abilities as pointless as they ended up making them. And a lot of that is a game balance type thing. I'm just my concern for Wuthering Waves is that it will fall into a similar trap where the only stats that matter are, do you have the bigger gun? Do you have the biggest attack stat, the biggest crit stat, the biggest crit damage stat? And that basically anything else that isn't pure offense might as well not exist. Because at that point, like, I get it, high skilled players, they're going to enjoy that. They're going to want the big numbers. They're going to want to be able to beat bosses quickly. I understand. But you need to leave open other valid paths of character creation and other design space for them. And that's something that I feel like Genshin did I'm going to say, poor job of leaving open those design spaces for themselves. They ended up closing a lot of them off very early on because of the strength of Zhongli making it to where defense was completely pointless. You brought Zhongli, he shielded you, he completely negated any downside of being hit of anything. You brought him and you were done.
Yeah. And that's a good point. And I remember those days 'cause I was playing during Zhongli's initial launch, and those were some drama-filled days. Content creators, man, that were going at each other for having for opinions, man. You would have thought we were discussing really heavy topics, but we're talking about a gotcha game. Anyway, yeah, and to your point, I think we've seen them introduce mechanics to get around Zhongli. So things like the bleed effect, right? So where you're losing health if you're hit by an attack, even if you have a shield. It's like having a dot from the wolves, right? In Inazuma was something to maybe get around that shield.
Hmm.
And we've seen other mechanics as well. Now, something for me, and this kind of goes back to our first episode when we talked about re-rolling, but if you make Genshin, which just wasn't really a thing, and in a game that's going to have limited party space, just make the reroll easy or provide a selector that just after a certain point during the prologue or the tutorial equivalent, and maybe just even let us choose who we want. But I think the way they do have a beginner banner
Hmm.
similar to Genshin, except for after 20 pulls, it does guarantee an SSR. It's like one of three SSRs, as opposed to Genshin. If you got a 5 star, cool, but congratulations, here's a Noel, right?
Yeah.
But even to get to that point for Genshin, it took time. And my goodness, once you did those 20 pulls, you'd already spent a multitude of hours in the game. So you weren't re-rolling. And if you did, it involved a new web address or whatever to bind to. So for Wuthering Waves, I hope there's an easier reroll process. But at least, at the very least, the beginner banner is going to provide you with a 5 star. Some other maybe pitfalls or things to learn from. I guess not necessarily a pitfall, but something that Genshin does well in terms of hyping up their characters and the character personalities with these trailers and the media we get there. Like for me, for Wuthering Waves right now, like I can't identify a character in Wuthering Waves aside from like I think the main individual.
Hmm.
Whereas Genshin at this point in time, like there were a few that were pretty iconic. Like already you recognized them. Like if you knew about Genshin, you knew who Amber was, you knew Venti, Lisa, Kaya, like those starting characters we were introduced to. Wuthering Waves, I don't know anybody's name. I
Yeah.
think they can maybe do a better job of marketing the characters, or if that's not their angle, if the angle isn't to build or sell us on the characters, A, I think that's a missed opportunity. But B, what's going to be that thing that grabs us then? What's going to be the pull and incentivizing us to be attached to this if it's not the characters?
I do think they are going for you getting attached to the characters. From what I have heard, again, and from what I've heard and seen from different Let's Plays, there are character quests very similar to the characters do have that sort of, let's call it pull on your heartstrings style of writing, where they really try and build up an emotional connection to the characters. I do
That's
agree.
good. That's good.
Yeah, I do agree that for the moment, they all just blend together. I know that there's a not gaming and there's a not, I'm going to call her not Amber, even though she's not even close to Amber. She's just a redhead girl with guns. Yeah, there's a couple characters that they're, let's call her generously endowed young woman that everyone's been talking about. But yeah, their names I can't tell you, but I know their designs at least. So yeah, that's definitely something that they would probably need to work on from a marketing point of view.
And to be fair to them, again, there's not a set release date, so maybe this is in the plans and it is in the roadmap, and we're just not at that point in the roadmap yet. But I feel like we're within a count because I think it's 2024 is when we're going to see Wuthering Waves,
Hmm.
and I think with Genshin, when you were within a calendar year, there was definitely some marketing going on. I'd like to see a little bit more of that. And then, of course, with the launch rewards, I'll be interested to see how generous they are with launch rewards. Because for Genshin, I don't know if there was too much
I think it
out there.
was,
Again, I didn't play at launch, but I don't recall there being too much. It was maybe a 7 day login event, which is
yeah,
we get standard now with new patches.
I believe it was 20 wishes and you had a 7 day login, which I think was 10 wishes, and then there was a 20 up front from the pre-order such. And I think that was it. I don't think they gave away a character or a weapon the same way that with they gave away Serval and a light count.
Yeah, and I think with Hoyoverse in and of themselves, with the Star Rail launch, they I think learned or that development team was like, hey, we need to do these things. So I I think Hoyoverse has learned from themselves and has improved, and so that's why I have hope for them in the future on future projects and in the current existing ones. So we'll see what Wuthering Waves does. I think there is room to have a smoother or better launch than Genshin had, but it's just then a question of how can we sustain that because like we've touched on, people are have well-developed accounts in Genshin, and it's going to take a lot to pull them over for that to become their main game, or even as we get more of these open world RPGs, how in our how are we going to balance them if
Mm.
they both for a lot of time and investment in that regards to build the accounts, right? So most people are maybe going to pick one, maybe two, and then I don't know if they're juggling any side games, on mobile that are other gotchas.
Yeah.
So we'll see. We'll see what they do, but I'm excited to see. Any closing thoughts or anything else to add on that?
I guess as far as my closing thoughts go, I think that we are well and truly into the WoW killer, Halo killer, now Genshin killer time period. We've seen a big success in the gotcha sphere, and a lot of people are scrambling to try and get their piece of the pie. My concern is that I'm going to be honest. I think that Wuthering Waves isn't going to be the one to crack it. I think Arc Knight's Infield will do okay just because it's coming from a very popular brand. I think that one's probably the best shot of having something with legs. But for the time being, I really expect that over the next 2-3 years, we're going to see a lot of open world RPG gotcha games. And there's a wave coming, and there's going to be some good, there's going to be some bad, but Genshin's going to probably have to step up their game if they want to try and keep their crown.
Yeah, I think them having a 3-year head start obviously has been huge, so they have that foundation, they have the roots of a player base, and it's not trying to earn new players like these other games are going to have to do. It's just maintaining essentially the market share that you have. Yeah, and as more competition comes out, they're going to have to adjust and adapt with the demand of the market in various ways. But I think they're up to it. They are obviously intelligent in terms of what they're doing with marketing and business wise. Are there areas of critique and criticism that we as a player base can provide them? Of course, they're not perfect and there are places to improve. But yeah, they do have a large lead right now. But we'll see what the others do, yeah, here in the future for 2024. Now, shifting away from the main topic, I do want to jump into obviously we had with Honkai Star Rail, we just had Black Swan's banner end, and with that we had the introduction and the release of Sparkle. So I do want to dive into her and potential team comps, what you think. So let's go ahead and get into that. So jumping into Sparkle, she's going to be the new character that came out this week. She is going to be a Harmony quantum type unit. And from everything I'm seeing, I tested her out. I know we've talked about her briefly in the past, and I think we both had said there's not really a team comp that we have that would fit for her, or we already had Baronia type thing. But man, after seeing the actual numbers and doing some little testing and whatnot, and looking at some other creators' spreadsheets and such, man, it's got me debating pulling for her. So let me give a brief breakdown on Sparkle, what she does, and how she enables the team, and is she Bronya or Bronya 2.0, right? So with Sparkle, while her auto attack, her basic attack does look cute, it's a little spinny kick thing, you're basically never going to use that. So you're going to be utilizing her skill, which is going to boost up the team. And then ultimately, I mean, with her ultimate, then this is the big gimmick of her kit and why everybody's really excited about her is when she uses her ultimate, she's going to recover she's going to recover 4 skill points, which is absolutely massive. And then also just being as part of your team, the number of skill points you can have, the cap normally 5 is going to be boosted. It's going to be up to 7. And if you are whaling for her, one of her Eidolons, I believe it's E4 or E5?
I
It's
believe it.
E4.
Yeah.
It's E4 raises that cap from 7 skill points to 8 skill points, and it recovers an additional skill point on her ultimate. So instead of being you have a cap now of 7 skill points and you get 4 on the ultimate, it's you have a cap of 8 skill points and you get 5 on the ultimate for the skill. The ultimate will also boost the attack damage that your teams have as well. She's a very obviously SP positive person, and then her skill will increase the target's crit damage as well as jump their action forward by 50%. And so a lot of people are talking about her, comparing her to Bronya, and does she do Bronya's job better than Bronya? And what I would say to this from what I've seen is she jumps the action of her ally forward by 50. So it's not like a full pull up all the way like Brony's is, like you can immediately boom, that's the next action type thing. But 50% is a good chunk, and most of the time will get the job done. The crit damage boost is nice as well, and it also works slightly different from Bronia's in that taking Jingwon, I believe, Lightning Lord. Yeah. So taking him, for example, in the case where you're running Jingwon with Bronya, her buff would wear off at the end of Jing's turn. So his boosted stats wouldn't apply to when the Lightning Lord actually attacks. But with Sparkle, it runs slightly differently so that the buff would still be there for when the Lightning Lord attacks. So it's different in that regards. And it's going to be huge for enabling units like Imbiber Dong Hung. It's going to be huge for enabling players like units like Blade or anybody else that soaks up those action points. And for me, while I do have an E1 Bronya who's built as part of my Jing Liu team, I don't know. I wouldn't necessarily replace Bronya in that team and put her in this. So I was debating, I don't really want to pull for her. But where there is some fun involved in what I maybe want to try out and why I'm considering now pulling for her is for a mono quantum team. Because I think this unlocks a lot of fun things that we can do with mono quantum. Now, I don't have Sealy.
Mhm.
And in the mono quantum setup, the setup is going to be Sparkle, Fushuan, Silverwolf, and then ideally Sealy. For me, I don't have her, so it would be Qingchua, who's the Mahjong tablet girl, who also absorbs what skill points and would very much be utilized by the additional skill points that Sparkle can provide. And so the concept behind this team is if an enemy is already weak to quantum damage, congratulations, cool, you're good to go. But if not, you're using Silverwolf's skill to 100% guarantee they will become weak to quantum damage because your whole team is quantum. And also with Sparkle having quantum units on their team, depending on what light cone you end up going with, there's even more of a boost that you can potentially get. Plus one of her abilities or one of her talents that you can unlock in her tree, she increases the allies' attack by 15%. When there are 1, 2, or 3 quantum type allies, increases the quantum type allies' attack by 5, 15, and 30%. So if you're running those 3 additional quantum teams, or those 3 additional quantum units, you're looking at 30% more quantum damage. So I think whether you have Sila or whether you're using Qingchua in combination with Silverwolf or Fushuan, I think that's potentially going to be a fun team to try and work out and play around. And what's also nice too is while obviously her light cone is going to be the best in slot for her, it's not necessarily required for her to be playable and be usable. You can get by with a couple of free to play options with those light cones. And if you give me 1 minute, 'cause I had this pulled up just in case I had some things to set aside for her. But the light cones, if you don't go for her signature light cone, if you have Baronia's light cone, that's a good option as well. But if you're a player like me who also has Bronia, that's going to be spoken for. But for options, you're going to be looking at past and future, which is probably your best option, which is a free to play light cone. It's probably your best 4-star option for her as well. And then as far as your artifact set that you're going for, you're going to be building the Messenger of the Traversing Hackerspace, the speed set. And you're going to want to try and get her to be as fast as possible. And then you're going to run Broken Keel as your planetary sets, just for the effect resistance, right? You don't want her to be dominated by Kafka or slowed or frozen or anything like that. You want her to be able to her turn. Because the other fun thing with this is that the faster your Sparkle is, it maybe allows you to then run on your main DPS, whether it be Dawn Hung and Biber, whether it be Sealy, whomever it is. It allows you to run, instead of speed boots, you can run attack boots because the unit's being pulled up to the front. And this is maybe even especially true if you're running both Bronya and Sparkle, though that almost seems like overkill at this point.
Yeah.
But yeah, run a super fast Sparkle. You probably want her. I think it's above. You want her to be over 160. That would be ideal
Mhm.
for speed. If you're playing for that range. Otherwise, the normal 134 threshold is probably fine. But the faster that your Sparkle is, the slower your main DPS can be, and you can throw more substats into attack as opposed to speed because again, Sparkle's pulling it up.
Real quick question. You mentioned Broken Keel, but if you're running Mono Quantum, you're probably I could see it if you don't have Fushuan, but if you don't, or if you do have Fushuan, do you still need Broken Keel? Because you're gonna
Well,
have
yes. Yeah, because yes, the effect res that's primarily a nice thing too. But the other big thing with Broken Keel is the crit damage it provides your allies is boosted by
yeah,
10%.
forgot about that.
Yeah. So yeah, the main effect is the effect resistance. The extra crit damage is there as well. If you don't have a good Broken Keel set for Fleet of the Ageless would be probably second. Just more HP is more tankiness for her, so she's less likely to die. Plus, if you're stacking speed on her anyway, that secondary effect of Fleet of the Ageless when this wearer speed reaches 120, allies are going to get 8% more attack, which is just going to be that much more of a boost. As far as what substats we're looking for, what stats we're looking for on our artifact set, for the body, you're going to be looking at crit damage. Feet, again, you're going to be looking at speed. Planar sphere, you're looking for tankiness. So either
Mhm.
HP percentage, defense percentage. Link rope, we do want energy regen rate. So we want to maybe, if you can get to us, if you can get up there into the 120s in energy regen, there's potential to maybe even two cycle her in order to get her ult going. But most players are probably going to be able to just do a standard 3-turn rotation in order to get her ultimate. So that energy regen rate is great. And then obviously for substats, again, stack speed until you hit the breakpoint threshold that you're going for, then crit damage, and then you kind of go HP defense, effect resistance, the typical supporter type build with stacking crit damage, since that's going to carry over with boosting upper teams.
Okay.
But that's what I've surmised from her and what I've seen in the numbers games. That obviously I do love numbers, but being a free to play player, haven't been able to personally test this out and crunch those numbers in that regards. I also was not unfortunately able to test anything out in the beta. I didn't get access to the beta to test her out to run this. So a lot of that is based off of other content creators doing a lot of the legwork there, which I give a shout out to Braxophone. He usually does a really good job putting that stuff together and also does some really good guide videos as well. But what were your thoughts on Sparkle? Have you been swayed in any way by what you've seen or read in terms of polling for?
I feel like at the moment, Sparkle is in a similar situation as Yelan and the Book Boy from Genshin. That it's similar situation where you have two characters that are very similar, but don't necessarily step on each other's toes. I think unlike those two, putting them together isn't really going to get you the best result. There might be a team out there. I might be talking out my butt here, but there might be a team out there that where Sele, Bronya, and Sparkle on one team, and just Sele gets all the turns. Just what? Hey Sele, why does your mom let you have 5 turns? I don't know. Like that might be a build for somebody out there, but I feel like the value from Sparkle is that you get to have two Bronyas. That's one Bronya is good. Two Bronyas is also really good. Mainly the reason why I'm holding off on rolling for her or pulling for her at the moment is I have Jingwan, so she could definitely fit on that team, but at the same time there's a couple characters coming up that I'm slightly interested in, Archeon being the big one. So it's
Acheron, yeah. Yeah.
I don't know why I keep on sticking an R there. Anyways, Acheron is coming out, and I'm tempted. I'm really tempted. If I did go for Sparkle, I would have to skip Acheron. So Grumble, don't know if I want to do that. The other
It's fair.
is that I don't know. Again, she didn't resonate with me from what experience I have playing with her. The big problem I actually found was that most of my teams are already SP neutral or positive enough to where I'm very rarely feeling SP tight. So getting that sort of breathing room doesn't matter that much for a majority of my teams. Examples being Jingliu is extremely SP positive. for a DPS. And the way I build her team, she's very positive. With the Kafka Black Swan Nihility team, again, yeah, it eats SP a little, but I'm basically SP positive on that one. I can always use the characters I want to use for it. When Ifin doesn't get to use her ability outside of the first turn, okay, that's not the end of the world. She's not really there for using
Her energy regen is probably good enough. You're ulting pretty often anyway, so that's fine.
Yeah, so it's no big deal there. Jingwan is not currently a team I use just because of issues. I guess Sparkle could potentially make him viable, so that does tempt me there. But I don't know. It really, at this point, I'm in that holding pattern of I want to hear what Asheron's kit is going to be.
That is same for me.
Yeah,
because I'm like you. It's one or the other. It's not going to be both. I want to see how Acheron kit works. I want to see if there's any synergy with my Nihility team, because my rumors are that she's not going to be dot based. I just want to see how it works, or if she can work in conjunction. But otherwise, towards the end of the Sparkle banner, I might dabble a little bit and go for some pulls and work on that Quantum team. But you said you're in a similar boat, or were there other characters even further down from Acheron that you're looking at?
and that's the last bit of it, which is I want to see what's coming in not the next patch, but the patch after. I want to see what rumors start bubbling to the surface there, since we have a fairly good idea. I believe we already know that it's going to be Aventurine and Ron.
Yeah, we have Aventurine, who's going to be what, imaginary
protection.
Okay.
Preservation.
Preservation. Okay. So yeah, so we'll see what he is, and then I think, and we know maybe 1 or 2 4-star units that are coming with that as well.
Yeah, Gallagher, I believe, is the
yeah,
he's a
man with the facial hair. A first for Hoyoverse games.
But yeah, like I said, I'm very much so on the fence. It's really going to depend on what's coming down the line. If rumor mongering is that within a patch or two, another character is coming out that I might be interested in, then I'll probably skip her. If not, then I'm tempted, but I'm not sold.
Yeah, so I think if I had to summarize my review, it's basically, if you are a meta slave and you do not have Bronya, pick up Sparkle. And again, you don't need the Light Cone, you don't need to E1 her. She's extremely serviceable, arguably the best at what she does at her job, with a 4-star Light Cone even. If you have Bronya, then it's, do you want a second Bronya, what you said? And again, if you're not a meta slave and you just really liked her design, or you liked her character trailer, which was super trippy, but was super intriguing to me, and you're like a waifu over meta type player, by all means, go for it. Pull what you want to pull. But in terms of optimizing your account, yeah, again, if you don't have Bronya, I would say this is a must pull, because she's going to be the best at what she does.
Yeah, really quickly, just moving on. I think we're good to skip forward. So last week, I asked for some advice or some suggestions for gacha games, and I did get a suggestion for Limbus Company, I believe was the name.
Yes, Limbus Company, yes. Yep.
So it did have a PC client, and so I did give it a shot. I will keep the review kind of brief. Unfortunately, I did bounce off of it. I don't think it's a bad game. It's just very much so a indie. You can tell that it doesn't quite have the budget behind it of a lot of other games. I'm going to be also honest, the interface in it is not amazing. It doesn't do a great job of onboarding you. In some ways, because it is almost too unique. The battle system is built around creating chains of attacks, but then by the end of the tutorial, they give you an auto button that basically auto builds your combos for you, which is a decision. I actually don't hate it. I'm glad they put that in there, because I don't think I'd have the patience to try and optimize their combat system. I think really what bothers me most is that you have a fixed, or at least based off of what I can tell, you have a fixed roster, and really the only thing you do is you change the costume of the characters, and then those costumes are the 4-star, 5-star versions of the characters, and they buff them. And maybe I'm too early in the game, but I really haven't figured out how to improve my characters. I seem to be locked into just leveling them up, and that's my only option. So I'm a little bit lost from a mechanics point of view. I did play the company did make a single player game, which is a sort of SCP Foundation style base building roguelike type game, and I played and enjoyed that. I really did want to like Limbus Company, but it's not clicking for me.
Yeah, I had tried Limbus Company when it launched, and I ran into some similar sentiments that you were sharing as well. Yeah, the UI kind of felt a bit cluttered. There was a lot going on, and it wasn't the easiest necessarily to navigate. I think it has potential, and because it is an indie company, while it may not have a massive budget that like a Genshin would have, I think that also sometimes means that they don't necessarily have to pull in as big a numbers to be considered successful to themselves. We have all these games that we see go into end of service, and it's like we thought they were doing well on Sensor Tower numbers, and we thought that the revenue it was generating was worth it. But different companies value different things at different levels, right? So we'll see where it goes. It may be something I go back and like dabble with because they do have a Steam client, and anything that has a PC or a Steam client, I'm more apt to give a second chance, just because it's nice to have that. Computers usually run faster than phones if things are well optimized. But yeah, we did get that suggestion for Limbus Company. Anything else that's on your gaming radar right now that you're trying out, or with just had time to try that out?
Yeah, I had a pretty stacked week this week, so it was that and Punishing Gray Raven were the two that I had time to try out.
Okay. All right. Well, that's nice. So for me, I didn't try anything new because I'd already given those a shake. But in terms of gotchas that I am continually ongoing and playing, just kind of run through some new stuff in each of those, starting with probably my favorite non-Hoyo thing right now, Nike Goddess of Victory. They just there was a developer note that went out today. By the time we post this, it will have been a few days ago. Basically, a little bit of a roadmap for the spring coming up and tweaks that they're going to be doing to co-op raids, some new systems that will give a little boost in power to maybe some of the Nikkei's that were available on launch that have maybe fallen off a little bit, as well as some other things that to look forward to. And then outside of Nikkei, Azure Lane, that's just mindless. I want to collect my ship foods, let it go on autoplay, right? For them, they released a new event with brand new ships, including a new UR ship, which I was able to pull within 30 pulls, which was nice. So that's available out there. Eversoul, they just launched a new event. It's a maid theme, including 3 new skins for some older characters that you can earn pretty easily just by playing through the events. And then Brown Dust 2 just released a new costume, Grand Hilder. They'd recently, about 2 banners ago, did Grand Hilder. They did like an idol theme. They had Grand Hilder as an idol, and now they just released another Grand Hilder costume for her as well. And in that game, they give you a free pull each day on each limited banner. And on the first day after the patch, I was able to pull her. So I've been extremely lucky in Brown Dust 2 because of the last 3 character banners that have come out. On the very first pull after the patch on 2 of them, I've gotten the banner character. So maintain my luck there.
You're burning all your good luck to the ground.
Maybe I am, because coincidentally, I know I've had good luck in my Hoyoverse pulls, but in my Nikkei pulls, well, I haven't pulled any banners. In Nikkei, they have molds, and every 50 mold pieces you get, you can quote unquote craft a Nikkei. And there's SSR molds, and in those, it's like a 61% chance to get an SSR. And I got my first SSR in one of those today in at least 20. It's been a good minute. My manufacturer molds, which are similar rates, you get 50 pieces of the mold, 61% chance at an SS.
Mm-hmm.
Man, it's been a minute. I can't even remember the last one I got. And then you have SSR molds, which are a 21% chance to get an SSR. Yeah, I haven't gotten an SSR in one of those in a while. So it's all averaging out, I would say. But But again, I haven't pulled on Nikkei's banner in a while. I have 50,000 gems and then 70 tickets saved up. So I'm ready to pull for the next thing that just aesthetically speaks to me. But as far as my gotcha news and new stuff that's come out and ones that I'm playing, that's it for that. I'm still dabbling with Blue Archive a little bit. Again, it's new. Things are new to me, but they're probably reruns to people that have been playing that one because I think Blue Archive's been out for quite a while. And Epic 7 did just release a new battle pass with a new skin. And I just bring that up only because their battle pass doesn't require you to spend real money. You can spend in-game currency in that for the unlock premium battle pass. You can also do that in Brown Dust 2 as well. You can spend diamonds to unlock their premium battle pass as well, which I'll be doing because there's good value with that. But that's all the news I have and what I'm playing this week in those games. We do want to thank you guys for joining us this week. Let us know, maybe you guys have some expectations for some upcoming games, or maybe you have a little bit more insight on ones we didn't talk about as much, with Arknights Enfield having had a beta test a while ago, or maybe you have some insight on Seven Deadly Sins Origins that we don't have, or maybe you're not as concerned about the Netmarble thing as I am. Or hey, maybe you guys have thoughts on Sparkle in Honkai Star Rail, or share with us your pulls if you pulled 4, right? Did you get lucky, or did you have to go to hard pity, or did you lose the 50-50, right? But if you did like this episode, be sure to like, follow, subscribe, hit us with a thumbs up there on the channel. You can email us as well at brohoyopod@gmail.com if you have any questions, suggestions for the show. Please do join us next week for our season finale, where we discuss exploration as content.
We made a choice, go fight against your fate. Pain will come with the blade. Pain will wake up the despondent crowd in the storming world somehow. Unsheath the sword not to kill. Unsheath the sword to random. Clouds above the ground. Wake up, it's time to gather now. We have no way